Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Sam. Finnish prog with a lot of emotional build. That lead though. I'm excited. I'm a fan of prog in general. I like powerful lead melodies, lead vocals. Not sure what lead is on that, but I'm excited to see what it is. Let's dive in. We're checking out Throes of Dawn with the track The Black Wreath of Mind. So I do like the smaller, almost harmonic sound, that one right there. Kind of distant, followed by the full body one. We have this constant tapping in the back, kind of brings up the concept of time. Sounds like a pendulum of a clock just this subtle melody followed by the descending arpeggiation. Oh, it's not a perfect arpeggio though. 70% of it I think is. There's a few notes in there that deviate from it though. Oh, this is a different instrument than last time, right? know, it just feels more full body. But the descending line sounds the same, so maybe not. Maybe it was a piano last time too. Just not as heavily played, maybe. Maybe a lighter touch. It sounds great on top of these, meaty guitars, though. Yeah, really great flow on this. All the ghost notes on the snare. Yeah, the metric mod's wild. We had a little bit of a bluesy bend on the guitar that led into some swung eighth notes on the piano. The piano then pushed into like dotted quarters at the end of its last run. There's those bluesy bends again. This whole song has my mind running. So much inspiration here. Curious what the song's about. I mean, that last section was a little weighty, had a little bit of darker tones to it, but big uplift right here. Feels a bit more positive. And the whole song's kind of been on that mode where it sits at a really neutral spot. Slightly leaning towards the positive side, slightly leaning towards the negative side. Never really dedicating to one or the other, though. That holds us within. Long forgotten. there's a closing of the hi-hat in the back, but it's not the same rhythm that we're getting from the ride cymbal over here. I don't hear the hi-hat anymore. It was an interesting like polymetric idea, and I thought they were going to run with it and not. I also love how still at this point the requester mentioned how good the leads were on this, and I'm still not sure what instrument they were referring to. These bluesy guitar solos, excellent. The piano runs, excellent. The vocals, excellent. I wonder when we shifted to 4. Was it during that last lull? 'Cause we were in 3 for a long time. Yeah. All we need now is that descending piano arpeggiation on top of this. It'd be so good. Told you it was going to come back. I wish it was in the last section, but the callback was needed here. Dude, the guitar movement continues to impress me. Yep. Yep, that was good. Talking about the guitar movement, I picked it up when we got out of the first guitar solo into the guitar duet. I think that was around like minute 8 or 9 or something like that. And we had the solo guitar in the center, and then the duet was pushed out one guitar on either side. I thought that was really well done. I don't know exactly how it happens. I mean, for all I know, this one just played a note and had, allowed the tone to ring out while these two guitars came in. But it almost sounded like it literally split the sound in two and it sort of crossfaded into the two corners of the sound. I mean, that just happened there too. In the final 30 seconds, listening to the guitar sort of split to have those final softer moments with the dual guitars. It feels like it just gets cut in half and then they just kind of push them out to the sides and it sounds so clean. I love it, man. The production on this in general is just really strong. I think that's one of the only showcases of like compositional production where things done in by the audio engineer influence the sound of the song in a way that feels narratively important. Everything else about this, as far as production goes, is just about mixing and placement and balancing and stuff like that. Putting instruments in the spotlight, making sure there's room for everyone. But everything in here is very crisp. It's very clear. Every instrument is clearly heard, and I love it. The bass has enough punch to it to kind of cut through. It still provides a lot of weight on the low end. The balance of our three lead instruments, the guitar, the piano, and the vocals, I think they share the spotlight rather well. We don't actually hear too much of them together. They really trade off who's doing the lead at any point in time, but they all feel balanced too. I don't feel like one of those instruments is more prominent or louder or anything like that against the other instruments. It seems like when they pass the baton, like when the vocalist stops and the piano comes in, it's just a really nice like fair balance between the two of them. They fill the same space. I think that's what I'm trying to say here. And it's just fantastic. This came out in 2016. I've never heard of this band before. They've been around for a while though, since 2000. So that's kind of cool. I might have to dig into this. The album's only 60 minutes long, 7 tracks. That would go by in a very quick time. But yeah, I'm very much sold on this. I really am. This is solid stuff right here. And of course, we're going to have to talk about the melody, but I want to kind of focus on the foundation a little bit first because I feel like this is an interesting one, particularly looking at the first 4 sections. We have like an A B thing that kind of goes on there. We have a vocal verse and then something that could be a chorus but is piano led. It's the introduction of that descending motif. Bum 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 ba dum bum bum ba da 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 da. Yeah, that line right there. That's memorable to begin with. It makes sense to kind of call that a chorus, but it also normally when we think of choruses, we think of vocal hooks. That's not what's going on here. But anyways, for this A and this B section, we hear them twice before we kind of move into the more linear writing that we'll see throughout the rest of the track before bringing this piano motif back in the finale. But these first 2 sections, there's not a lot going on. I was actually a little worried about this. We have bass, guitar, laying down solid bass work, creating a strong foundation sonically, giving us some root tones here just to fill out this low end. We have some guitar work in here that I think is fine. It's a lot of chordal stuff, a little bit of riffage as far as like rhythmic things going on. We have very soft vocal melody on top of this and very light drumming. The drum pattern is semi-involved. There is frequently quite a bit of lighter cymbal and snare work in here. We have a lot of ghost notes going on. It keeps the song feeling like it has some sort of momentum, but allowing the overall pacing of the song to feel on the slower side. Then we have the melodies on top of this, the vocals or the piano. there's not a lot going on. It's beautiful. I'll give it that. The atmosphere is palpable. The melodies are beautiful to listen to. They're very gorgeous, whether it's the vocals or the piano. Lovely stuff. But there just isn't a lot of meat to it. Little did I know, and I probably should have noticed when it was like a 15-minute song, that even though this took up the first 3 or so minutes, that this was still the introduction to the track. This is the first act of a story. We have to set things up. We have to introduce the audience to the world here. And I think they do a great job of that because we get a lot of atmosphere here. We get to know how the instruments work with each other. We kind of get to be introduced to the different timbres of the instruments as well. There's a little subversion to this. We'll get to that in a second. It's a fun thing, but we are introduced to a majority of this, and this section does tell me that it's kind of, like I said, it's neutral. There is negativity to this. There is certainly some weighty elements, especially in that descending arpeggio in the piano. It's kind of, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it has that brighter element to it, but it also has a couple of tones that introduce a bit of tension to it. And I think that's a perfect example of how this song operates. It isn't afraid to introduce a bit of dirt and a bit of grit harmonically to it. It doesn't mind introducing tension and darkness, but it doesn't want to reside in that either. It always balances out with something brighter and more optimistic. I don't really have any strong emotional ties to what's going on. I don't feel, I wouldn't call this melancholic or sorrowful. It's more of a neutral negativity, maybe something like pensive, wistful, maybe even. Like being wistful is kind of negative. You're yearning for something of the past, but it isn't something overwhelmingly negative like hatred or sorrow or defeat or fatigue or anything like that. It feels like a neutral negativity. And I feel like the positive side is the the equivalent of that, where nothing in here feels overly joyous. There's nothing celebratory going on here, but there are moments of, I think, uh, beauty is really the term I want to go for. Not necessarily joy, but just being in awe of something. That's where a lot of this sits for me. Never really leaning too far in one direction, really hovering around that neutral point and slowly, or I guess just slightly leaning into either direction. Whenever it feels like, too, it isn't like this section is brighter, this section is darker. It can change in the middle of an idea. I like that sort of malleability to it, and it never really feels like it breaks away from an atmosphere or an emotional state. It feels consistent throughout. So whatever they're trying to achieve here, I think they do a great job of capturing this multi-layered emotion in the atmosphere, and it starts here right at the start of the track. It's the tempo, it's the atmosphere, it's the chord progressions, it's the melodies. Everything speaks to this emotional feeling. After we get done with the second piano melody, though, things kind of change a little bit. The drums take a little bit more energy, a little bit more direction to them. We bring more of the ghost notes in, more of the cymbals in. This is where I noticed we went into, well, I don't know if it necessarily went into 3. This is when I picked up we were in 3. I think the arpeggiating thing is in 4. Yeah, it is in 4. So the bridge is in 3. We do go into 3 here. I don't know why. During the song, I could not figure that out. I could not remember if we were in 4 to begin with. But we move into a 3. We start playing around with different types of syncopation. We play around with not necessarily polymeter, but metric modulation, which is an idea of kind of changing the, how would we describe it? Changing the accent points in a rhythmic pattern. So say that we emphasize quarter notes, maybe we're going to emphasize every other quarter note. So maybe we have an accent on 1, 3, 1, 3. But then we want to change those into triplets. Da 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 da. Oh, I did not conduct that right. But for every 2 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to have 3 equidistant beats in there. The drummer loves to do that, honestly. We also had, was it the drums or no, it was the piano that pushed into a dotted quarter, which is kind of the same thing. It's 1.5 beats long, so you're kind of getting an accent every 1.5 beats, which kind of pushes a little bit against quarter notes. This happens quite frequently across the entirety of the bridge, and we start to see a little bit of it here with the drums. It technically is polymetric when you align it against the rest of the instruments, but usually when I bring up polymeter, it's because the drummer is doing 2 meters at the same time, or more meters. So some of these drummers are crazy. They have different pulses and different limbs, all 4 different limbs. It's wild. But yeah, usually it's just 2. This ramps up some of the intensity, the rhythmic intensity of what's going on in the song. But I also find that we begin to engage with a little bit more of the emotional side as well. The guitar switches to a very bluesy style of playing, where before it was more, I guess you would call functional, really focusing on harmony and rhythm. Here, we're focusing on bends all over the place, really leaning into a bit more of a darker harmonic vibe. The note choices bring a little bit of tension to the general chord progression, and there's a lot of bends in here. This is straightforward blues rock melody writing. Interestingly, the piano also begins to introduce some swung ideas in here too. Swung rhythms are when you, so in music, we have straight eighth notes, which is each eighth note is the same length. And an eighth note is half of a beat if we are in 4/4 or 3/4. So quarter notes would be 1, dut, 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 dut. And eighth notes being 2 would be dut, 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 dut. But in swung eighth notes, you give more emphasis to one than the other. This is what creates that syncopation that swing music is really known for, what makes it really dancey. Da 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 da. We introduced some of that in the piano work. I thought that was wild because we ran from this into the dotted quarter note emphasis too, which created the polymetric idea, or I guess the polyrhythmic idea going on against what the drums are doing, and the drums had already introduced some polyrhythmic ideas in the previous section. This whole bridge is about taking this core foundation, this simplified idea that we saw at the beginning, and pushing it in different directions. How can we push the melody? How can we push the rhythm? How can we push the harmony? How can we push the atmosphere? And I think it does a great job of all of those. We start by putting in these little rhythmic changes. We have the melodic change in the guitar. We bring in some new melodies in the vocals too. They have a different inflection to them. They're a bit more full-bodied. Eventually we get to the guitar solo. And here the song feels like it's pretty big in a way that it hasn't been yet. And it only gets larger once we separate that out into the 2 guitars, so that we have the duet going on. And this is just a big peak of the track. I mentioned at this point, all I really wanted was for the piano arpeggio to come back and kind of sit in the song. I said on top of it, but I think in it would have been a lot better. And it's actually where they decided to take it later on when they reintroduced that piano motif. But I think here at the peak would have been an excellent time to do it. And it actually wouldn't surprise me though if they tried and it was just too much. There is a lot going on here, and maybe it was difficult to balance and mix right. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was actually a draft out there where they attempted this and they're like, yeah, no, we're gonna have to put that somewhere else. But I like how we were on the same page there. We both knew that that motif had to come back. We just had different ideas of where that would be. Um, the energy comes down a little bit. We have just a single guitar continuing on with this highly emotive playing, very bluesy, lots of bends, lots of shred now, though. I thought that was an interesting direction to go. As far as increasing intensity, the dual guitars gave us extra harmony and a little bit of clashing movement, as occasionally they would divert and do their own thing. But eventually we start shifting towards faster playing, and the guitar just starts shredding. A bit of a distant movement from the slower, elongated, bluesy guitar playing. But it felt like a natural progression for the melody to go in this direction. And eventually we taper this off entirely. We have the piano that comes in behind it, and we end the song just on that piano motif. The pacing on this is wonderful. The ebb and flow, the rising and falling action, the increase of tension and the decrease of tension. I think what I like most about the melody writing in general on this, whether it is the piano lick or the vocal melodies at any point or any of the guitar solos, is this ebb and flow of dark and light, which I've already kind of touched on a little bit, but it shows up even in the solos, even in these lead instrument parts, even in the shred. It will lean a little bit towards darkness, pull out of that, go into something a bit brighter, dip out of that, and then introduce some tension. Maybe not necessarily darkness, but a little bit of extra harmonic bite. It continues to complicate the emotional feeling of this track. And when you pair it with the overall narrative of this song, starting out simple and then complicating that and twisting it and adding more complexity and more depth and more layers to it until we have the peak of the song there, coming down to that single guitar once again and putting the piano beneath it, sort of a reminder of the way things were, an attempt to calm the song back down. Everything just works beautifully to tell this story. I think a lot of people are just going to enjoy the atmosphere of it. They're just going to understand it on a surface level of this sounds good and I like it. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. That is definitely a good way to listen to music. I have definitely run into issues by being a bit more analytical about music and finding that I don't enjoy some things that other people do when they just, allow themselves to be overwhelmed by it. But I like how this song, I think, allows both sides. You can absolutely just fall into this song and feel it and enjoy it and have a good time. But there's a lot of depth here too and a lot to learn. As I mentioned earlier in the reaction, that this song has my mind going in so many different directions. There's so much inspiration going on. At its heart, it's some sort of doom rock, doom metal kind of thing. It's definitely slower tempo, heavy emphasis on simpler playing up until we get to the shred at the end. And, well, I guess even the blues guitar stuff, because blues guitar is actually a lot harder than it sounds. I know it's a lot of just bending notes, but you got to know how to bend notes. You got to know what notes to bend. There's a lot of, I think, non spectacle skills that go into being a good blues guitarist. The shred, though, is spectacle. Like, you look at someone, you're like, oh, yeah, I can't do that. His fingers are moving faster than mine are. You can, like, immediately know that there's a skill level gap there. I think blues guitar is a bit more deceptive, where it looks easier, but if you ever try it, you're like, okay, what I'm playing doesn't sound like blues guitar soloing at all. Um, there's a lot of depth to it all, but it has my mind going. If this is Doom in some capacity, where does all this other stuff fit in? Where's the contemporary classical piano come from? Where's the blues rock stuff come from? Where's the... I don't even know what to call the vocals. They're very emotive in a way that I don't hear too often with Doom, even though I find Doom to be a very emotive genre in general. The drums are kind of jazzy and exploratory. I mean, also just kind of prog rock. I feel like a lot of prog genres under the umbrella like to borrow from jazzier ideas, but it's it takes a lot from many places and smashes it together into something very cohesive, and it has, like I said, my mind just going in a lot of directions. I like Doom. I think it's a cool platform, but it's never been something I've been too interested in making because it's an atmospheric genre. I'm not really great at writing atmosphere, not like just sitting within a vibe. That's just not me. I've always got to be moving. There's got to be something new coming up. But this has sort of shown me a direction that I could take Doom into. I think my approach would be very different. The end result would not sound anything like this, but using Doom as a platform or just a slower, heavier tempo of slower moving ideas as a platform to explore melodic concepts in other styles. Yes, I can get behind that 100%. And like I said, there's my mind was like, we got to work on this. I got ideas brewing. We got inspiration. Throes of Dawn, you have become a muse for me. I'm excited. I got to start working on some of this and see where it goes. It might not end up anywhere, but just being able to experiment with some of this stuff I think is going to be fun. Let me hit some lyrics on this, see what's going on, and then we're going to wrap this one up. This is kind of vague and leaning towards philosophical too. Combined, it's definitely an area where I tend to have issues in lyrics. However, I think this is a sort of, how shall I call it, a positive nihilism. The song is, I think, about realizing that there is no purpose to life, no greater reason for us to exist. We simply are, and finding a sort of comfort and hope in that. It says to see through all those elusive dreams is to see the end in every beginning, the kiss of decay in every forehead, and every promise sworn for a lifetime. To see the opening of the end, to see the love only as a weapon, the auburn sorrow slowly changing form. As distance grows, the vision fades, remove the black wreath of mind. It's time to turn skywards and diffuse all meaning. So the first stanza is mostly about kind of seeing through illusions, trying to see through what truths, and maybe they would put truths in quotation marks, the truths of life, trying to see past what is immediately noticeable and seeing what is beyond that. It calls them elusive dreams, the things that you cannot obtain. Look past that, and what do you see? He says, the end of every beginning. To me, that I think is about death. The end of every beginning would be a life. Whether we're talking about seeds growing into trees, or we're talking about animals, or bacteria, or humanity, or even this planet. Everything that starts has an ending, and here you can see the end of every beginning, which everything will eventually die. Everything eventually decays. Even bringing that word up in the next line, the kiss of decay in every forehead. No one can escape this. Everything degrades over time. It says, so remove the black wreath of mind. Turn skywards and diffuse all meaning. So find the truth past all of what has been attempted to be explained. It says, for there are no answers and only silence that holds us within. So now hope, long forgotten, is breathing for the very first time. It says, once you get past all the illusions and realize the reality of life, that everything that is born dies, and that's it. There's nothing before, there's nothing after, that you can find hope now, knowing the truth of life. Like I said, it's a bit nihilistic, but it finds a positive element out of it. Do I think it's a positive element? I don't know. It makes me feel a little smaller thinking about things that way. But if it brings hope to this person, if it helps them revitalize their love for now, for their life as it is, who am I to say it's the wrong way to look at life? And I think that dance of finding something positive about something that feels so hopeless, that's that dance in the music of matching and trying to pair the brighter, beautiful side of the music with that darker, tenser side. These are my thoughts. Throes of Dawn, the Black Wreath of Mind. What'd you think of this track, though? Anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own thoughts, opinions, or interpretation of this. Please put all of that and any other thoughts you have down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today, but I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.